Perhaps no group of people have more questions about whether or not the Christian faith is true than college students, particularly college students who have grown up in the church. How can they know that Christianity really is true, and how can we help them with the questions that they may have? I'm joined today by George Haraksin, who is a philosopher and a Christian and a pastor, to help answer that question. George, as you interact with college students practically on a daily basis, because you teach at a college setting, what kind of questions do students have about the Christian faith that you find, and how do you help answer those questions for them?
Well, I think students come in, and once they start engaging, especially in my discipline with philosophy, because it asks so many questions, they start to get a little frustrated that there's so many questions and not enough answers. It can feel like that psychologically. So many doubts do arise, and not just about the Christian faith, about other things in the world too, with the discipline of philosophy. So it just doesn't, it hits all of one's worldview. But one of the things that I like to do is help them understand just what doubt is, and to help them understand that it's not a sin necessarily. Doubt, I like to say, doubt is like a headache. A headache tells you that something is up, something is wrong, and then you have to take some steps to deal with it. Maybe you need to drink some water. I mean, you can take steps, like you can cut off your head. That would solve the problem, but that's overkill, to say the least. So what are the right steps to deal with the headache? So what are the right steps to deal with doubt? And sometimes I think there's a presupposition that when you're approaching some of these scientific or these philosophical questions, that we have this pressure that we should just do it on our own, that we somehow should just be able to come up with it on our own, or Google the answer. And that can be a good thing, to be able to fish on your own, to do those things, but we need guides to help us, to get us there. I've mentioned to you before, I have a friend that's a professional mountain climber, and he helps people climb and go on journeys all over the world. But he recently went to go climb Everest, and he himself needed a Sherpa, a skilled guide to go up that mountain. And I think as students are asking questions, and particularly of the Christian faith, that they need to feel comfortable to invest in guides to help them get there, skilled guides. As far as the particular questions, in philosophy, we deal with so many different areas, from metaphysics to epistemology to value theory to ethics and logic. So the questions are all over the map. But a lot of them arise on moral issues, and the problem of evil is a perennial issue that comes up, because suffering. And I think today, in our contemporary setting, we have such access through, whether it's viewing a YouTube video, social media, the internet, we can see so much evil in the world. Whereas, 100, 200 years ago, you could hear about, you might experience it, but you wouldn't hear about it as quickly from all over the world. We get numb to the fact of that. So I think sometimes students are suppressing some of those issues, but in my classes, we resurface them, of course, and it's almost like opening up a wound again. It's like, oh, now I have to deal with that. So I think the problem of evil and suffering is one of the main ones that regularly comes up.
Yeah, in my experience, the problem of evil comes up even if you're dealing with scientific discussions about the Christian faith. And my advice to all Christians is to spend some time really wrestling through that issue and prepare yourself to offer some thoughtful responses to the problem of evil.
Yeah, and I think, just a few helpful distinctions can get people a long way down the road. I was a student of Dr. Stephen Davis, who's a Christian philosopher. Of course, Dr. William Lane Craig has dealt with this. I also was a student of J.P. Moreland. Distinguishing between the intellectual problem of evil and the emotional problem of evil, and how we respond to each of those, is important. Intellectual problem of evil deals with the rational compatibility between a good, powerful God and evil and suffering, and the emotional problem of evil deals with the weight and the burden one feels. So I approach the emotional problem of evil, as a pastor, as a friend, as a counselor, whereas on the intellectual problem, I approach it as a philosopher and theologian. And though those two intersect in life, and we have to be mindful of that, it's good for dialogue's sake in that to understand that there's two things going on there. And once a student sees those different distinctions, it equips them to wrestle with it in more skilled ways, I would say.